It's my pleasure to introduce Hera Büyüktaşlayan, on my right, and Ergin Çavuşoğlu, Banu Karaca, and Marva Arslanmaz. We have about 3 different themes that emerge in this new series of fanzines. The first one of these brings together fragments and traces of the emigration waves in the history of the Republic. This is a loose thread that can be followed in different zines. The issues prepared by Banu, Ergin, Zeynep, and Mariana, and also the one that we produced in collaboration with Hera are among these. And also Zeynep is not on this panel, but I'd like to mention her fanzine as well. She looked into the Heimatlos academics who emigrated to Turkey during the Second World War. They contributed enormously to the university reform in Turkey, and Zeynep is particularly interested in the academic production in the area of agriculture. And we are in the process of organizing an event that will complement her fanzine, which includes a translation of a report written in German by Hans Wilbrand, who was one of these academics who came to Turkey as an exile. I'll start with you, Banu Karaca. Our first speaker, Banu Karaca, is an anthropologist. She earned her PhD from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. She's currently a fellow in the Art Histories and Aesthetic Practices program at the Forum Transregional Studies, and also a visiting fellow at the Institute for Cultural Inquiry in Berlin. She is the co-founder of Siyahband, a research platform that documents censorship in the arts in Turkey.
Thank you. Is this working all right? Yeah? No? Yes? Okay. Thank you so much, Atif and Dilek, for organizing this and for inviting me. I was a bit worried in the beginning, you kept saying artist, so I just want to give the disclaimer, I'm not an artist, I'm far from it. But unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not sure. But I don't want to take up too much time. Perhaps just a few words about what brought me to do the zine and the manner I ended up doing it. Dilek and I had been talking not only have I followed her work and the previous installment of Kayısı Kent Ardort with great pleasure and excitement, but Dilek has always sort of encouraged me to, at some point, do something with the many stories I had sort of collected, as so many immigrants do, about the kind of mismatches and displacements that you experience in everyday life, sort of going back and forth between Germany and Turkey, and sometimes, or at the time still New York. I was always a bit hesitant to write a personal story, or to start even bringing personal anecdotes, but my main work over the last 10 years has been comparative research on arts and cultural policy and state violence, and the entrenchment of the art world in state violence in Germany and Turkey. And that always brought with it a sort of displeasure, especially by my German counterparts, and generally the story, the sort of question of how I could possibly compare Germany and Turkey in that regard, or in any other regard in that matter. And so what I did over the years is just just to try and think through ways and how to relay how these cases are actually really quite similar and interestingly, strikingly so, despite all Orientalist sort of differentiations that people would like to often project on these two cases, is that I try to collect stories, some of which you might know very well and some of them are lesser known, about how actually Germany and Turkey are so very much intertwined in their histories, and that there's actually an intimacy rather than foreignness between these two countries, and that this intimacy is in many ways constitutive for the histories of both places. And And given, I think, within the current refugee crisis, I'm sure everyone has certain images in their minds that sort of reflect the very human side and the suffering, the danger and the risks that people have to expose themselves to under conditions of war to try and flee to hopefully safer shores. But I think from all the images that I saw, the one that unsettled me, I don't want to say the most, but in a very particular fashion, was when German Chancellor Merkel visited Erdogan before the elections, or the re-elections, or again elections, or whatever, repeat elections, in November. And I think that image, when I saw this photograph of them sitting together on these two thrones, I thought this has sealed the fate of so many refugees, because it was clear that this was a sort of handshake and embrace that would position Turkey in a place and give it incentives to keep refugees out of the fortress Europe with all its might. And in a way, this seemed to me as a new installment of this of this very long and troubled history between Germany and Turkey, both in its imperial and its modern day formations. So, so I tried to, and perhaps I should have written it this way, I'm not sure. But I tried to use the example of what my Turkish passport used to say, which, you know, as an immigrant kid, I was born in Germany, but I had Turkish citizenship. It always said, I don't know if your passports have this or if passports still have this at this point, but it would say profession and then, you know, two dots on top of each other, and then it would say child of laborer, and when I was 18, the child of was struck off. And I think I've always sort of been stuck on that act and on this sort of conspiracy between two states to so harmoniously actually delimit not just individual sort of imaginations, but also manipulate history in a way that makes it appear as if labor migration was the first step in what is, I think, otherwise a very interesting and compelling history. I can talk more about it if there's questions, but I think for now I would leave it here and give it over to
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Well, the next speaker will be Hera. We collaborated on the fanzine with Hera, but in fact there is a third person that is at the very center of our collaboration, and it is Ivi Stangali. But actually, I'll introduce Hera a little bit more in between. Hera is an Istanbul-based artist and a storyteller. She studied at Marmara University, Fine Arts Faculty. Her works deal with notions of otherness, belonging, and memory. And she has exhibited recently at the Venice Biennial and Istanbul Biennial. I had the pleasure in the last year to observe how she works, and it's been really nice that we had a chance to collaborate for this fanzine. Now back to Ivi. Ivi Stangali is an artist who was forced to leave Turkey in 1964. In the last year and a half, in two exhibitions, we came across information about her. The first one was the exhibition that Hera was involved in. It's 20 kilos, $20 exhibition. There was some information about Ivi in that exhibition. And the second one was Bedir Rahmi Eyüboğlu exhibition that consisted of his letters. And there was a letter written to Bedir Rahmi by Ivi from Athens in 1964. So those are the 2 points that sort of started off this project. Now I'll leave it to you, Hera.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for including me to this project and to Atif as well. Well, beginning from actually, you summarized, but just as a kind of small summary about Evie. Evie is the student of Bediran Meyuboğlu, and she has studied in the academy from 1942 to 49, but then she becomes the assistant of the professor as well. And also she has been taking part in one of the most important artist groups of the time, which is called Onlar Grubu. And actually, all the artists that are there, like Turan Erol and Nedim Günsur and all the other artists, have similar interest at the time. But whilst we were doing the research, we could not unfortunately find much material, like let's say originals from Evie's creation. Evie was, well, the first time that I met Evie actually was, as Dilek mentioned, was at this exhibition I participated as like curating and doing the research called $20, 20 Kilos, which was at the 50th anniversary of 1964 exiles. So at 1964, for the ones who doesn't know, actually was the year when at March 12,000 Greeks were exiled from Turkey, the ones who had the Greek passport, because of 1922 exchange between Turkey and Greece. Some families, some people had already Greek passport as well as the Turkish passport. So at 1964, well, actually before that there was the 1955 pogroms that were happening, which was aimed to target the whole economy, of course, but slowly after 55 until 64, there are all these small exiles that we actually don't know, which actually hits most important characters in the cultural life of the community. So at 1964, 12,000 people are exiled in 48 hours, the first group, which are forced to take 20 kilos of luggage, which is like 1 fork, 1 spoon, 1 plate, and really like not important, not valuable objects together with them. So Evie is one of them, and so blocking all their lives in this way is also like blocking their properties, their bank accounts, meaning that they just take their memory inside their luggage and have to leave to a place. Okay, it's Greece or other countries, but thinking the fact that it's Greece, yes, it's the language and the religion is common, but actually as a metropolitan life, it's totally different. So we see these traces in Evie's letter that she has written to Bediran Meyuboğlu, to his teacher, that how she cannot adjust, and the moment that she's exiled, also how people treat when they're getting off the plane. So actually, this was the moment when we connected our research together with Dilek, because she has seen this exhibition where Bediran Meyuboğlu's letters were there, and Evie had been writing letters to his teacher when he's away because she was his assistant, and you see how her production is also affected as being the assistant of Bediran Meyuboğlu as well. Yes, sure.
I think actually you were talking about like people had to leave with a limited kind of whatever they could fit in one luggage. Actually, we found out from the letter that Evie had the books that she had done the illustrations for in her luggage. That's the one information, and we kind of set the whole kind of, in a way, the setting.
Yeah, because that's the only thing that we had in a sense. So these were some of these books that she illustrated were from Homer's Iliad, translated by Azra Erhat. Utopia, the cover of Utopia of Thomas More, and Jack London's books covers. So this was the only thing that we could reach toward according to her production, because in her letter she mentions that she cannot continue her production because, in the first days at least, that she doesn't have her paint, and she doesn't have any money, and she's with a baby as well. So what we did was to become a kind of an instrument to an artist to come back to her own root, in a sense. with both, like in the library, you will see the books that she has her illustrations that Dilek is showing right now, some details. And also, we took some parts from her last letter that she wrote when she went to Athens to Bedirahme Eyüboğlu, and also some parts from Iliad that totally fits with her sentences, and kind of created this letter in a way. I personally see it as if she's there, like saying that she wants to come back, and in a way through this letter she's coming back to a library that is in her own city in a way. So if you want to add more.
I feel that this is the start of something. Like, we kind of managed to find very limited information, so this is also a call for anyone who might know anything about her that we'd like to hear about. Our next speaker is Ergin. Ergin studied at the National School of Fine Arts in Sofia in early 1980s. Then he completed a BA in painting from the University of Marmara, which is followed for studies in Goldsmiths in London, and then at the University of Portsmouth. Borders, boundaries, border crossings, and immigration are recurring themes in his work. And for me personally, his work Liminal Crossing, which was shown in Deco previously, has been a source of inspiration for me in this exhibition. We didn't have a chance to show that work, but still one metaphor from there kind of slips into the fanzine as well. Yeah, okay, I'll leave it.
Okay, just say thank you for the invitation. And maybe I should start with, I'm not an anthropologist, but I was approached by Dilek and Apricots to contribute to the science. I kind of felt overwhelmed by the idea of how that relates to the idea of the prophet and how the artists engaging with the disciplines of anthropology. So I'm just going to start with a very short quotation here about somebody who I've been looking at recently closely is James Clifford, one of the well-known anthropologists of our age. Sorry. And basically, what I was looking at was the idea of not specifically the ethnographic term as termed by Al Foster, but I was looking at the idea of the indigeneity term. I was looking at how sort of indigenous art has been brought forward and been given sort of different platforms over the last 20 to 30 years or so. So anyway, and then Clifford says something like, and I was very interested in his idea of the ethnographic surrealism, where he says that the modern surrealism and ethnography began with the reality deeply in question. The idea of them to render the unfamiliar comprehensible tended to work to kind of in the reverse sense, making the unfamiliar strange. So, as Dilek pointed out, central to my practice have been many of these ideas of liminalities, of place, non-place, mobility, migration, and so on, kind of stemming out my personal experiences as somebody who been through a process of migration very much like the one Hera explained. I grew up in Bulgaria, and my family was part of the exodus of migration, which happened in 1989, the summer of 1999, where something like 450,000 people were forced to migrate, and in a very similar fashion, they were given a limited amount of space to take their belongings and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, probably to some degree, I didn't witness the process. I was doing my military service at the time in the so-called the last communist army in Bulgaria. And later, 6-7 months later, I joined my family. I just got a plane from Fiji, but that was it. My migration was very, very simple. But I've been told stories, and one of the stories was a very personal sort of family story, the one you referred to. It's a piece called Criminal Crossing, which is based on real facts. It's a kind of it's a personal story about migration, which relates to my family deciding to take a piano, which belonged to my sister, and rather than taking other groups, my father is an artist as well, and we had a couple of studios at the time in Bulgaria. He locked up all his artworks, but decided to take a piano. Metaphorically, very peculiarly, I still haven't understood why. And the story I was told is about this, how can I say, transposition of this kind of cultural object from one place to another. I mean, at the time, of course, we have to think that Bulgaria was to the east and Turkey was to the west. And the liminal zone, or the buffer zone between two is quite large, if anybody's crossed Capitan Andreevo or Capocule border crossing. And what I was told is that the piano was offloaded from a truck and then pushed by hand into the borders. So I lived with this idea for many years. I tried out many different things. You know, how do I interpret this? Being faithful to what happened, but at the same time not being overly political or overly sort of poetic to some degree. But I felt that the only way I can respond to this, and this happened exactly 20 years on to the day, is to reenact it. So I went in reverse process. I cast people into that journey. I bought a piano, the same type of piano. It took me about a year to take permissions from both countries to film on the border crossing, and you know, after kind of a very difficult process, if you like, of obtaining these permissions, we succeeded. We were given something like 7 hours window to film that on the actual border, and yeah, this is what happened. I mean, I just reenacted that very particular moment of pushing the piano by hand and crossing from one border to another. Of course, this kind of very much relates to many of other ideas I've been thinking, how an idea becomes creative, an art project. You know, how does it belong to the systems and the field I'm involved in? And here I would really like to point out sort of Gilles Deleuze's ideas about that it's not so easy to fabricate a concept, and once you have a concept, it has to be really celebrated in that sense. But also he points out that that each concept belongs to its own field. So idea in cinema or idea in literature is not the same as idea in art. So for me, converging this idea of the kind of very political idea of border crossing to an art project, it took so long, but I thought that was the only way I can respond to it. Just show a very short excerpt, or this is an image from the actual work. We filmed from 2 points of view, one from the Bulgarian side and one from the Turkish side. I mean, the work was initially actually commissioned by Ludwig Forum in Aachen for an exhibition I did in 2009. And I felt, when I was asked to propose an idea, I felt very strongly that this is something I would like to engage with. And as the scene is not overly dramatic, but the weather was very dramatic. We had a thunderstorm. As I said, I use people that have been through that journey or their sort of relatives. Yeah, I call it a reenactment, if you like. Thank you.
Well, Marwa. Marwa is an artist based in Beirut, and she's a founding member of the artist organization 98 Weeks. And as for Istanbul art audience may remember Marwa's work from the 12th Istanbul Biennial. It's one work that I really like then, all about Acapulco. Well, she will be reading from her performance lecture piece that she performed at the last homeworks. It's called Learning to Dance.
So, thank you again, Atif and Dilek, for inviting me. Actually, as Dilek said, I'll be reading some excerpts from the fanzine, and that was written as a lecture performance. But I would like to say first that in this lecture performance or text, I actually followed the path or the journey of a ballerina that is called Magda Saleh, and that was a first ballerina at the Opera House in Cairo in the 60s. She suddenly left the whole ballet training and the Opera House, and went on a journey across the Nile to document and to observe ethnic or so-called ethnic dances. So this is the journey I follow in this text. And okay, so I'll be reading some excerpts from the fanzine. The most beautiful industry in our country is the title of an article that talks about a dance school. If you pass next to an industrial building, don't think this is a new metal or car factory. No, it is a big hangar, but nothing of what you expect. It is a place where bodies get trained to dance in a certain manner and join the national troupe. Bodies in masses that have learned to dance ballet, to become, or not, ballerinas. The new body had to learn ballet. The magazine where I found the photographs dates from 1958. And it was printed in Cairo. At that time, publishing was already nationalized. And the articles that circulated were clearly promoting a certain state project. The dance school was obviously part of it, and the new bodies dancing ballet as well. These modern bodies of dancers would become representatives of the country with its specific borders. A specific gesture or a dance movement is representative of a country mapped by human hands and fingers. Okay, so now I will read the next excerpt. How to fly? To answer this question, I found a very thorough explanation. In order to fly successfully, one needs to ground the feet, lean the knees, and find their verticality through a strong, straight spine. Consider the spine as the center of the body. Push towards the floor and jump while stretching upwards, as if two opposite forces are pulling in both directions, upwards and downwards, bringing the foot into the thigh and the second leg wide open. So while trying to look for dancers that were part of the ballet dance school, I got in touch with Magda Saleh, an ex-ballerina at the Opera House in Cairo. She had joined the ballet dance school in 1958. In 1966, she danced in the fountain of Bakhchisarai, directed by Lavrosky, and was awarded by Nasser himself the Order of Merit, a medal for her role and dance. She was the first dancer to be recognized by the state as a national achiever. Magda shared with me the thesis she had written on ethnic dances in Egypt, titled A Documentation of Ethnic Dances in Egypt. The following paragraph I will read is taken from her thesis. The land of Nubia, extended from Aswan in Egypt to Dongola in the Sudan, has disappeared. Submerged under Lake Nasser, the largest man-made lake in the world, formed by the building of the Aswan High Dam. This immense structure, which took a decade to complete, is modern Egypt's ambitious effort to harness the Nile for agriculture and industrial purposes. The price Egypt paid for the anticipated development of her resources was the total submersion of the Nubian lands. Nubia, renowned throughout the world as an ancient land rich in archaeological sites, became the focus of widespread concern, and plans were made for the rescue of its celebrated monuments. While archaeologists and engineers worked against time at this task of preservation, and the artists and photographers recorded for posterity the beauties of this disappearing land, many people visited the site for a glimpse of old Nubia. So this is a description from Magda, taken from her thesis, as she travels along the Nile for her ethnographic thesis. So she started writing her thesis in 1977 and recorded the so-called ethnic dances that she thought were disappearing. She stopped at different towns along the way in Nubia, Siwa, Marsa Matruh, and others, and annotated the dances using the lab annotation system, a dance annotation system. She also entered each place through its geography, describing the way tectonic plates have moved throughout the years, shifted Eastern Africa apart, forming the current geography of the Nile, and how man-made lakes have submerged ancient monuments and displaced towns and whole communities. In this landscape, she followed the currents of the water moving south. She was mainly concerned with transmitting this embodied knowledge, and was afraid the kind of dances she went after were slowly disappearing and would be submerged, just like old Nubia, by the modern dance institution to which she belonged. The dancers who embodied this knowledge were getting older, and knowledge dies when the body of the dancer dies and becomes a stagnant entity. But by bringing the dances into her modern institution of annotating, recording, archiving, preserving, and building the heritage, maybe she thought she was saving them from being forgotten or submerged. Thank you, Marwa. Thank you all for this lovely session. Actually, there's one thing that I'm quite curious throughout this experience as moving from place to place. I'd like to ask you specifically, and I'd like to also hear about all of you as well.
the question of language. Maybe this question will lead into the second session as well. I know that you are bilingual. You were brought up speaking Turkish and German, but you prefer to write in English. Is that right? Is that a difficult question? I don't know, but I'd like to hear. What is this preference?
Yeah. I think there's different ways of saying this, or sort of answering this question, and it's sort of, as you know, those who know me know that this sort of preoccupies me quite a lot, because the question is how proficient I will ever be in Turkish. I'm not sure. In a way, I've sort of come to understand English as a language that frees me from both of these places in a way, and it's been my academic language, and I think I can ask questions in English that I have a hard time conceiving of in either of these languages. I don't think I would have come up with working comparatively on Berlin and Istanbul if I had stayed either, if I had sort of remained in a German-speaking context or a Turkish-speaking context. I don't know if my imagination would have been sufficient to even conceive of that. And in that way, language is both this sort of thing that you always struggle with and against, I think, especially when you're trying to move across languages, where you always feel insufficient and unable to really express what you would like to say, but sometimes also has this. And there I sort of differ in terms of the previous evaluation that you had talked about with regard to English. I think on a very personal level can be, for me, a way of breaking free from, from other kinds of histories and from the kinds of limitations that on a very personal level feel sometimes when I'm in those languages that are supposed to be my mother tongue in a way, right? And, perhaps that's a short answer. I'm always sort of surprised, and I'm always grateful when I find people who are able and willing to translate my writing into Turkish, and it's always very interesting to look at my own writing that way. Unfortunately, I'm unable to read the Arabic version, which is, but I'm very grateful that this has been translated into Arabic as well, and find it very meaningful that you operate, and very brave that you operated through 3 languages, and more, which is, I know all too well, quite an insane endeavor, usually.
You asked the same question? Oh, actually, yeah, it's interesting language because I speak few, not many, but several, and none of them is my first language, if you like. But I work a lot with literature or with literary sources in my work, and I often encounter these problems of the barriers that the language creates, because language is more of a thinking process rather than actually just a way of expressing yourself. And I very frequently work with Russian literature. Coming something from Bulgaria, we had to study Russian as part of the normal education, and we had separate Russian literature lessons, and we didn't like it, we hated it, but now actually, after 40 years, I'm back to reading, and I try to work as much as I can with Russian literature. But I have projects that I had to take sort of last-minute decisions whether to. There was one particular instance, it was a piece written by Tolstoy, which I've read in English, Bulgarian, and Russian as well, and I had to make a decision, do I film in Russian, do I film in Turkish? Because we filmed in Turkey or in English, and I finally decided to work with the Turkish version, which became something else, but I think it's just another application, if you like, so language, as much as clarifies, but also clouds and complicates things as well.
Okay. Well, I think language in my case is kind of quite mixed up because I know a couple of languages, yet some of them, like Greek, which is one of supposed to be one of my mother tongues. I don't know it perfectly, but I write with that. Well, for me, I think, in short, I could say that I see language as space, because you create your own space with language, either written or said, and also it's the same throughout histories as well. And in migratory acts also we see that very much as well. Wherever you go, if you find someone who speaks your own language, you feel at home. So I think for me it really associates with this feeling of the sense of belonging and, you know, positioning yourself to a place. So yes, I would say I see language as space. In my own life also I see it like that, because, you know, how you position yourself whilst you have so many different identities that are inside you, and, you know, that you are surrounded with so many, yet they are also about to get lost as well. So it's a way of kind of making things like invisibility into visibility, maybe, as well.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer this, actually, because I'm often thinking in one language, writing in another, and so most of my thinking process actually happens between Arabic, mostly in Arabic and English. I read a lot in both languages, so I think that when I'm writing, I mean, I can talk about it from the practice of writing. So I guess that when I'm writing, I'm often like going back and forth between the two languages, even like, you know, the writing itself becomes, I mean, if an Arabic-speaking person is reading a text that I wrote in English, and I made some really strange, you know, phrases, or it wouldn't be unfamiliar for them. So I think it's an ongoing process of translation and negotiation that becomes or materializes itself most in the process of writing, I guess. Yeah.